Next week, we're going to take them up to, I told them I'm taking you to the edge of hell, Hell's Canyon. And we're going to sit up there. There's a spot just at the far end of Waha where you can see the entire world. And we're going to watch the sunset together and sit around a fire and talk about there. Anyway, we got all these things we're going to be doing this summer. I could use a covered trailer. We want to take them on a kayaking trip. I currently have 2. And, I mean, I guess we could try fitting like 7 kids in one kayak. That could be fun there. But anyway, we could use a handful more. So if you have some we could borrow, I'd appreciate you letting me know there. And I'd very much appreciate your prayers. If you got to know any of these teens and you got to know their story, you'd fall in love with them and your heart would be filled with compassion for them. It just would. And we got a really unique opportunity here. I'm excited for it there. So anyway, all right, that's all I have to say about that. Let's get to work. All right, 1 Peter chapter 4. 1 Peter chapter 4. Now, I try to stay away from sports metaphors because I would always use sports metaphors if I don't force myself not to. So I had to train myself out of it. And so now I have to get myself back into it after all these years of not doing them. But I have been at a baseball tournament. I am unapologetically going baseball on you today. If you cracked my head open, it's probably 90% baseball right now. So I'm just going to roll with it. And you can tune out if you want, or you could really embrace the greatest game that God ever made. And God made it, if you're wondering there. So, yeah, thank you, Kyle. Yeah. Actually, Kyle, you're showing up in today's sermon a little bit too. Yeah, no, the good stuff there. But every now and again, somebody comes along who's just not like the others. And actually, it was me, Kyle, and Courtney. We were sitting there watching one of the games on Friday, and something was said about Tony Gwynn, and Kyle made the comment of, "I love Tony Gwynn facts." And I was like, "There's Tony Gwynn facts?" It's not just that Tony Gwynn was a great player in the day. There's Tony Gwynn facts. There, you can put a picture of him up there, just, soak in the glory of Tony Gwynn. Here, if you guys don't care about baseball at all, though, it doesn't matter. Like, this guy is unlike probably any player that you've ever, he's one of the greatest that's ever been. There. Matter of fact, in the past 100 years, nobody has more batting titles than Tony Gwynn. A batting title is based on batting average. So when anybody in the last 100 years that would step up to the plate, nobody was as consistent as hitting the ball as he was in a century there. Since World War II, Tony Gwynn is the only player to bat above 350 in 5 consecutive seasons. In 75 years, the only player to do that. Think about how many thousands of players there have been. He's that good. He has batted, if you bat 300, you've had a really good season. He batted 300 in 19 consecutive seasons. Currently, the best player in majors right now has 4. That's how good he was. He is that good. Over the course of his career, he faced 18 Hall of Fame pitchers, right? Hall of Fame means you were the best of the best, the elite of the elite. He faced the elite of the elite pitchers 541 different times, which that's an entire season's worth. If you play a full season, you'd probably be around 540 at-bats. He faced an entire season of just Hall of Fame pitchers. He hit 331 against them, which I looked. If you were to go, he plays in the National League. If you were to go to the National League, the last 8 batting champions, he beat 6 of them. He would have won the batting title 6 of the last 8 seasons if he only faced Hall of Famers, right? That's how good he was. He was nearly impossible to strike out. In his 20-year career, he struck out 434 times, which averages out to about 21 a season. To put that in perspective, by the end of April this year, 129 players had already struck out 22 times. He's that good. In 1995, this was his best year for strikeouts. He had 577 plate appearances. He only struck out 15 times. To put that in perspective, on Friday night, LCSC, who's a pretty good ball club, they had roughly 40 plate appearances. They struck out 14 times. against a pitcher who was really good at the NAIA level, but likely will never have a professional career on, or at least on major league level. Maybe get a few nods here and there, but nothing consistent. He's really good. Anyway, this is Tony Gwynn. Somebody comes along who just, every now and again, somebody comes along who just isn't like the others. I want to set that stage before we get into our text here today on 1 Peter chapter 4. All right. But I do want to read 1 Peter 4. Can we go to verse 12 of this chapter? It says, Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's sufferings, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. If you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. But let none of you suffer as a murderer or a thief or an evildoer or as a meddler. Yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in that name. For it is time for judgment to begin at the household of God, and if it begins with us, what will be the outcome for those who do not obey the gospel of God? And if the righteous is scarcely saved, what will become of the ungodly and the sinner? Therefore, let those who suffer according to God's will entrust their souls to a faithful Creator while doing good. Stop there. Now, if we were to really want to dig in and study this text, we'd probably spend most of our time talking about what it's like to suffer as Christians, or how to respond, or like the code by which we live by in the midst of suffering, which should all be very worthy things for us to do. But I don't really want to focus in on that part of the text here today. What I want us to focus in on is I want us to see what Jesus looks like in this text. We see a Jesus in here that, to me, is rather endearing. The Jesus I see in here, I liked Jesus before I read 1 Peter 4. I like him better now. Because you start getting into what he's like here, well, actually, before we get into that, verse 13 is kind of my main focal point here. He starts with, but rejoice insofar as you share Christ's sufferings. Rejoice insofar as that to the degree that you suffer. If you suffer a little, rejoice a little. If you suffer a lot, rejoice a lot. That actually kind of goes the opposite direction of what we would think. We would think the life that warrants greater rejoicing is the life with less suffering. And according to 1 Peter, the life with more suffering warrants greater rejoicing there. And you kind of get into why would we do that? My take, at least, on how Peter is doing this is kind of the way I feel in the wintertime, which I know maybe this isn't the great week for a good winter cold weather illustration, but we'll go with it. Is one of the things that I love in the wintertime. I love it when you're outside and the weather is miserable. I love it when it is cold and it is wet and there's a wind, not because I enjoy that, but because when you go inside and your wife has made homemade soup and you go take that nice, long hot shower and you sit down to that homemade soup and you get that warm soup belly feeling, you know what I'm talking about there, right? And your house is climate controlled and it is warm and it feels so much better than if you'd never gone outside at all. If you've never gone outside and got cold, it's oh, this is nice. That's where but if you've gone outside and you've been cold and wet and freezing and miserable for a long time, and now you come in and you experience all these things, the rejoicing is greater, right? So the greater, and Peter's telling us here is listen, while you're in the middle of that greater suffering, the greater it is, the more you should rejoice, because this is going to feel that much better on the other end of this. It's going to feel that much sweeter there. All right, but now we get into the person of Jesus and what he looks like here. As you look at the way he's described, particularly in this verse, it says, but rejoice insofar as you share Christ's suffering. One of the first things that stands out to me is that he shares. What do we learn about Christ in here? He shares. Now, I know you look yeah, but he's sharing suffering. This is the worst sharer ever. It's why couldn't he share Krispy Kreme? There, I could get into that. Jesus, he shares donuts. He's sharing suffering. And it sounds like a terrible thing to share, but when you start thinking through what this means, like part of what when it talks about how he's sharing suffering, and we take in the greater picture of Jesus throughout the rest of the Bible, we get into, one of the things that Jesus has done with suffering is that he has shared in our suffering. That's one of the central facets of the Christian faith, is that we have a God who came and suffered alongside of us. He left his throne. He emptied himself. He pitched his tent among us. He said, I will live where you live. I will live how you live. I will experience what you experience. I will be hungry like you are. I will be cold like you are. I will be rejected like you are. I will be betrayed like you have been. I will experience the entirety of the human experience. I will do all of this, and I will do this with you, and I will do this for you. I'm going to come and I'm going to share in your suffering with you. I'm going to share in this life with you. We have a Christ who shares. There's this word that I really like this word lately. It's the word solidarity. One guy was writing with solidarity. I liked how he wrote it. He said, solidarity is not an act of charity, but of mutual aid between forces fighting for the same objective. Not charity. It's two people saying, we're going after the same thing together. Let's do this together. As I was sitting at the World Series, which I was there for 18 hours yesterday and 18 hours the day before. I have nothing but baseball in my head. And cheesesteak. But I was sitting there and I was thinking through the sermon a little bit, and I was thinking through, like, what's a good metaphor here in front of, like, I was thinking about baseball. I was like, is there a metaphor of, like, what role is Jesus in our life? Is he the umpire? Is he the coach? Is he the fan? Is he the teammate? Is he I kind of going through, and I think he's probably, I think we could work him in as a metaphor for all of those. Courtesy runner, that was another one I thought of. It's like, he's a courtesy runner too. Like all of the metaphors that work, but one of the metaphors that stand out to me here is Christ's teammate. If you go to the World Series, you'll watch a lot of teammate things happening there. One of the most entertaining, not one of the most entertaining team in the World Series to me is Central Methodist University. I watched them for the first time last night. It was so much fun. Their pregame stuff, like if you don't even care about baseball, just buy a ticket, come in, watch Central Methodist for their pregame stuff, and then go home. Like it was that entertaining, at least for me. I'm working on the field by third base, which is meticulously groomed. Just saying. And they're in the third base dugout, and they had this whole pregame thing that they did. It was obvious they'd spent a lot of time developing it over time, because it would be like one guy would call something out and another guy would call something out in return, and then somebody else would call something out. But I don't think it was scripted. I think it was like this, it just seemed like they were like riffing a little bit, but off of one another, but in this rhythm. And then they all start moving together. And then they had this dance that they would all start doing, and somebody would shout something out and they'd change the dance and they'd start all doing a different dance, and they're singing and all that stuff. It was funny. Like it was fun and it was funny. And then they'd get up they were a pretty good baseball team. I think they're number 2. Yeah, they're seeded number 2 right now. They're a pretty good ball club. And they'd get a base hit. And I noticed that like all the guys in the dugout,